These players had their transfers denied by dictators. Since everybody is already tired of Kylian Mbappe's latest round of drama, let us take a look at the players who faced real adversity in their careers. As in most cases, the humblest of backgrounds produced the most precious diamonds, and Eusebio was no different. His life began in Maputo, which was part of the Portuguese Mozambique at the time. He honed his skills on makeshift pitches with balls made from socks stuffed into newspapers and applied for a trial at Grupo Desportivo de Lourenço de Marques, a Benfica feeder team. Since he was rejected without any form of trial, young Eusebio went to local rivals Sporting Club Lourenço de Marques, which was a sporting feeder club. His talent shone through, and soon enough they were reported to the legendary Benfica coach Bela Gutmann. The first transfer controversy of his life ensued. Benfica made an approach to his family offering a paying contract, and the family agreed. Sporting were none too pleased that their brightest talent in their feeder team was snapped up by their biggest rivals and contested the legitimacy of the move. In a story fit for a spy thriller, Eusebio was given the codename Ruth Maloso and moved to a safe house in the Algarve with 3 bodyguards. He was kept safe until May of 1961, when his move to Benfica became permanent. 4 Portuguese titles, 1 European Cup, 1 Ballon d'Or, and a 3rd place finish at the 1966 World Cup followed. In the summer after the World Cup, La Grande Inter came calling, looking for Eusebio's talents to help them secure the 3rd European Cup. As was the case with most athletes living in repressive states, Antonio Salazar declared Eusebio a national treasure and scampered a move that would have seen the player earn his year's salary at Benfica in 1 month in Milan. Luckily for the Portuguese people, the 1974 Carnation Revolution deposed Salazar's regime 4 years after the dictator's death. For Eusebio, however, it was too late, as he could only secure a move to the United States at the end of his career. On December 29th, we lost Pele, arguably the greatest footballer of all time. One criticism that is often thrown at Ore is that he did not show his talents in Europe, although the Brazilian game in the 1960s was easily on par with the European game. The casual xenophobia amongst many European football fans prompts them to take this fact into consideration when discussing the moniker of the greatest player of all time. However, history could have been much different. You cannot spend your playing career scoring obscene amount of goals, making whole defensive units look like toddlers, and winning 3 World Cups without attracting interest from the greatest clubs in the game. Many clubs have been linked with the Brazilian magician, Real Madrid, Inter, Juventus and Manchester United amongst them. Whilst many links could have been mere fabrications by overzealous journalists, 2 of these bids have an actual story behind them. Years before Inter's Helenio Herrera failed in his bid for Eusebio, $1 million was offered to Santos for the services of Pele. 1 year later, president of Juventus and Fiat, Gianni Agnelli, traveled personally to Brazil to negotiate a transfer, which involved Pele receiving shares in the automobile manufacturer but returned empty-handed. The reason for both these rejections was state interference. Despite not being a dictator, President Jânio Quadros was acutely aware of the importance of football to his electorate, and the importance of Pele to football. And with his support dwindling after a series of failed reforms and dubious decisions, which included banning bikinis, he signed a decree which named Pele as a national treasure that could not be removed from the country. His term would not last much longer, but Quadros' successors never thought of revoking the decree, instead only reinstating the bikinis. Pele's big money move would come many years later at 35 after his retirement from Santos. Ever the gentleman, whenever he was asked about those transfers, Pele would smile and say that he never thought of leaving Santos at the peak of his powers. Our next inclusion covers a whole squad instead of just one player. Zaire's dictator President Mobutu, who was, let's be honest, a massive prick, also had an unfortunate influence on his country's footballers. After coming to power, he recalled all Zaire-born footballers back to the internal championship with the aim of creating international fame for his new country through football. As he was a man you could not refuse, Zaire's players returned with a fully home-based squad. They won the 1974 African Cup of Nations. The team would also take part in the 1974 World Cup, where a strong showing was expected. Despite playing an exciting brand of attacking football, the first game ended in defeat against Scotland. The next game saw them take on Yugoslavia, but a major issue unfolded before the game. Their supreme leader had sent a large entourage with them to Germany and quite a sizable sum of money, which should have been used both for the team's salaries and to give the impression of wealth and success. But of course, like any self-respecting parvenus, the Zaire delegation blew through the whole budget, meaning their players would not get paid for the next games. A boycott took place in the form of a 9-0 loss to Yugoslavia, and FIFA had to intervene and pay the players themselves. Back in Zaire, Mobutu, apoplectic with rage, sent his henchmen to threaten the team in their hotel in Germany. The whole hotel was closed off, and after a tirade of abuse and threats, the players were warned that they should not return home if they lost to Brazil by more than 4 goals. Disaster was avoided in spectacular fashion in the next game, with one Zaire player hoofing the ball up the pitch as Brazil lined up to take a free kick. In later years, football did not occupy such a prominent role in the dictator's thoughts, and his reign of terror finally ended in 1997. Before Robert Lewandowski, there was Włodzimierz Lubański. He is the second highest scorer of the Polish national team and is considered one of the best Polish footballers. In the early years of his career with Górnik Zabrze, he impressed not only the Polish public, but also managers like Sir Matt Busby and Helenio Herrera. The latter coached him in a charity game in Basel, in a Europe team that faced a South American team. After the game, 2 Real Madrid players who were on the pitch with him that night tried to convince him to join their ranks. Lubański was skeptical his regime would allow him to leave, but held out hope. Sometime later in 1972, Madrid's representatives traveled to Warsaw with a $1 million offer, but the representative of the Communist Party refused them. Apparently, the reasoning was, what would Moscow say? His career was negatively impacted by this failed move, as he sustained a knee injury which was poorly treated by the incompetent doctors assigned to him. To this day, he states that he simply was a regular player after the injury. In the 1950s, Hungary was one of the most feared teams on the European continent. Their proto-total football and WM formation ensured that they were a daunting prospect for every opposition team, and one only had to look at the games of the 1954 World Cup to understand how good this team was. They literally had to name the game the Miracle of Bern to encompass the shock that West Germany sent throughout the world by defeating the Hungarians. But whilst the footballing side of things was as rosy as it gets, the internal politics of the Hungarian state were a bleak affair. On the losing side in World War II, and with a long history of revisionism and far right-leaning tendencies, the repression introduced by the Soviet-backed regime was as high as it could get. Unlike countries situated further east, Hungary bordered Austria, which was rescued from the clutches of one of the most disgusting human beings to walk this earth. Despite the world being rid of Joseph Stalin for 3 years, his successors were just as repressive as him. Not content with making the lives of their own citizens miserable, they sent troops to suppress the 1956 Hungarian Revolution. This event saw the country's most important team, Budapest Honvéd, away on European Cup duty. Many of the players refused to return to their country, even with the government threatening their families. After a fundraising tour, they returned to Europe, where they parted ways. Players like Ferenc Puskás, Sándor Kocsis, and Nándor Hidegkuti decided to defy the regime and found clubs in Western Europe, whilst others returned home. Honvéd was back then the sports club of the armed forces and contained the core of the mighty Magyars, but its assembly was mired in controversy. Since the communist takeover, the club received license to raid other clubs, especially Ferencváros, which had right-wing leanings. From there, they recruited Sándor Kocsis, Zoltán Csibor, and Laszlo Budaj. The team's goalkeeper, Gyula Grosic, attempted to leave the country and was arrested and later set free, after which he also miraculously joined Honvéd. 2 more footballers have attempted to escape their tyrannical regime with opposite levels of success. Laszlo Kubala left his country in 1949, and despite FIFA siding with the despotic regime, as they often likely do, and banning him for a year, he went on to find success with Barcelona. Sadly, our next inclusion lost much more than a dream transfer at the hands of his regime. Sándor Sücs was a defender that won 3 titles with Újpest and played some of the members of the golden generation on the international stage. In 1948, he started a relationship with pop singer Erzsi Kovács, but since she was married, the state did not take their relationship easy. With Sücs at risk of losing his status as a footballer if he continued his romantic affair, the couple found a handler to promise them to take them to Austria. Since Kubala's defection, the state was much more careful in regard to their athletes, and their handler proved to be an agent of the state police. The couple were taken into custody, and since Sücs played for a club affiliated with the police, he was found guilty of treason and executed. Every year, a youth football tournament is held in his honor. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, a new wave of strikers appeared in Romania that dazzled on the internal and external stages. Most notable among those was Nicolae Dobrin, making his debut at 14. He and his team Argeș Pitești stunned the world, beating Real Madrid at home, which prompted Santiago Bernabéu himself to lodge a bid for him. As all the clubs were technically state-owned, the decision came to the head honcho himself, Nicolae Ceausescu. Bernabéu begged and pleaded, offering $2 million and a new floodlight system, but the dictator did not want to sell his most prized asset to a club that had links with Franco.